All right, fantastic. Good evening, dear students. Thank you very much for having joined me one more time. It's a pleasure to me um, to be with you one more time. And as I told you yesterday in advance, today we're going to be discussing a new task of the speaking section. And well, judging from your performance last time, I think that you're actually going to find this very easy and very much manageable. But as I said, nonetheless, we're going to be discussing a new task. That is the third one. That is very similar to the second one with regard, for example, to how you respond to it, to how's this question organized, for example, how's this question delivered as well. It's very similar. So as I say, you're going to be getting a very interesting excursus on this particular topic, and let us start with it. All right. Let me just open here and share my screen with you. Okay. So for those of you who are just joining, as I told you, we're going to discuss the third task of the speaking section. All right. So let us get into it. Here we are. Fantastic. So, okay, more people are joining. Very good. Okay. So please, all of you look at my screen, and you're going to discover, first of all, something very interesting. If you read the title of this section, you're going to notice the following. It says the speaking section task number 3. And the name of this section is integrated speaking task. And this may sound very much familiar to you, because if you remember the title of the second task, it was also called integrated speaking task, right? Integrated speaking task. So as you can see, dear students, well, this third task, as I told you, belongs to the same type of question that the second task of the speaking section also belonged to. When I was commenting upon the different general aspects of this speaking section, I talked to you about the fact that in this section, although we have 4 different tasks, we have just 2 types of questions for this task. That is to say, we have, first of all, the independent question, that is a question or a question type that we're going to be analyzing and studying when we arrive to the first task of the speaking section that we're going to discuss later on in our classes. But nonetheless, the second type of question that is called integrated question is to be found in actually 4 different tasks. That is to say, the second one, the third one, and the fourth one. Therefore, that is the reason why this task number 3 is also called integrated speaking task, because it also belongs to that category of integrated question, right? And you're going to notice that that actually helps us very much. Why? Because given that this task is, well, let's say it's part of the same family than the second task and also the fourth task, the manner these questions are delivered, how are we going to respond to them, and our role in these responses is very similar. And you're going to find that to be very, very much helpful. Why? Because of course, if we don't vary very much in our questions, then we will not also vary very much in our responses. And that means that we can actually exercise the same skills and techniques we were also using in the second task of the speaking section, right? Anyways, as I say, how's this task similar to the second one? Well, let me tell you this to begin with. The manner in which this task is similar to the second one, first of all, is that in this case, you're also going to receive 2 information sources before you respond, all right? These 2 information sources are going to be very similar to the ones you received in the second task, because in their substance, let's say, or in their nature, they don't vary. The first information source you're going to receive before responding is going to be what? It's going to be a reading passage. You're going to have to read a reading passage that is no more than 100 words long, approximately. And that, of course, is something that you have already done. Therefore, you know what to do, right? Now, after you read this passage, you are also going to have a second information source. And it's very similar to the one you received before, because it's an information source that consists in a listening passage, just as you did in the second task. Now, let's say here the characteristic that varies in this section when compared to the second one, or excuse me, with for this task when compared to the second task, is that if you remember, for example, when we were practicing yesterday, all the topics we received in the second task were very trivial topics, right? because all of them describe, for example, changes in bus services. They describe new activities that the students were planning. They talked about new policies in the university, things that were not actually very much complicated to understand and grasp. Nonetheless, in this third task, we're going to be starting something very important in the TOEFL exam, academics, because the reading passage and the listening passage you're going to receive as information sources for this response are going to be about an academic subject. And that, of course, is going to complicate things a little bit more. Why? Well, definitely academics are more difficult by themselves. And of course, this also reflects or is reflected in how your reading passage is going to be elaborated, how the listening passage is going to be delivered. And you're going to find that, for example, with regard to the reading passage, it doesn't vary very much, but nonetheless, you're going to find that the way the reading passage is written is a little bit more complex because, of course, you're going to be reading, as I say, reading passages about academic subjects. And let me define, first of all, what I mean by academic subject. By an academic subject, I mean any particular discipline or subject that could be taught in a university. So for example, if you can imagine a topic, a discipline, a subject being taught in an American university, European university, then let me tell you that that subject could also appear here on this particular task. You could receive, for example, a reading passage about biology, physics, chemistry, mathematics, I don't know, medicine, nutrition, languages, literature. It could be anything, okay? From, as I say, from art until computer science. It's a huge spectrum, right? And as I say, you have to be prepared for reading any type of academic subject, right? Now, after you read this passage, you're going to receive, as I say, a listening passage. Now, this also varies a little bit. Why? Because the listening passage will not be a conversation anymore, okay? But before we get into that, let us read this slide here. It says, the third task will deal with academics, as I said. Just like many questions and tasks in other sections of the TOEFL exam test pattern, you will be reading a short passage that is 80 to 100 words long. This is for the first information source, the reading passage, and it will discuss an academic topic, as I told you, right? Now, what about the second information source? The second information source will be a listening passage, and it's not going to be a conversation anymore. It will be a lecture. Do you know what is a lecture, dear students? Well, a lecture basically is a class, right? It's a class delivered by a professor on any discipline or area. It could be a class on mathematics, as I told you. It could be a class on biology, chemistry, physics, literature, anything. But basically, you're going to listen to a lecture, okay? And this lecture, as I say, is going to be delivered by an actual professor. We're going to listen to a professor discussing this in a classroom with the students. So in this case, you're not going to have, let's say, a conversation of 2 speakers or 3 speakers, etc. But you're going to listen to only one person, right, speaking. That is going to be, of course, the professor. Now, sometimes in these lectures, the professor allows his students to make some interventions. That could happen. Not, let's say, not very much commonly, but nonetheless, it could happen. Even if that happens anyways, all your attention, let me tell you, dear students, should be placed in the professor, because it's the professor, the one who's going to offer you, in this case, all the vital information you're going to need to include in your response later on. Okay, so please always pay attention to the professor, to the topic he is delivering. And of course, in this case, he will not be giving his opinion. What he will be doing is teaching, right? Teaching the subject, giving information that he considers to be accurate. Now, this is very important. So as I say, it's going to be a lecture delivered by a professor. And well, it's not going to be more than 1 minute. Now, let me mention one more thing. If you remember in the second task, something very interesting that happened in the task was that the reading passage talked about a subject, and then the conversation was also about that subject. Remember, for example, if the reading passage in the second task, the last one, right, was about a change in the bus service, then we listened to 2 students from the same university discussing the same topic. That is to say, the change in the bus service. Now, that is also going to remain here. How? That, for example, imagine that the reading passage is about Darwin's evolutionary theory. You know about it, right? A very interesting theory in biology, also with its applications in chemistry, etc., anthropology as well. Now, if the reading passage is about Darwin's evolutionary theory, then when you listen to the professor delivering his lecture, you're going to discover that he is also going to be discussing Darwin's evolutionary theory. Therefore, as I say, there is a continuity between between the reading passage and between the listening passage. As I say, you're gonna find that the reading passage talks about an academic subject and that the lecture also discusses the same academic subject. Actually, this continuity or this relationship of the materials is so strong sometimes that the professor will be actually referring to the article. He will say, you remember, students, that article you read about this? And when he says that, he's referring to the same article you have read. So as I said, there is a strong continuity between the second task, between the first passage and the second passage. So whenever that happens, well, take it that way because it's normal, okay? Fantastic. So what about, for example, the timing you'll have for this section? Well, let me show it to you. It's exactly the same timing you had for the second task. As you can see, 45 seconds to read your passage. And as I say, doesn't vary with regard to its length. It's also 100 words long maximum. And well, how much time you're going to have in order to listen to the lecture? 1 minute approximately. Why? Well, because of course, the recording lasts for 1 minute or 1 minute and a half or 1 minute and 45 seconds. So it's not going to be a, let's say, huge problem. Now, after you receive both information sources, you're going to have one more time 30 seconds of preparation. Here's where you outline your response, you decide that you prepare your response, and then after you finalize with those 30 seconds of preparation, then you start with your 60 seconds to deliver your response. As you can see, the timing has not been altered whatsoever. It's exactly the same, right? Fantastic. So here you have it. Now, before you make your questions, that I know you may have some of them, let me show you some illustrations, okay? Because I know that, of course, by showing you such illustrations, you're going to understand this way better, okay? So let's get into this illustration that I have here, and you're going to understand here. All right, here we have it. So look at my screen. You're going to see this reading passage here. And if you notice, it has this title. It says, what is mitosis? Now, as you can see, from the very beginning, the title seems more threatening, right? This is a serious topic. What is mitosis? Here, we're not discussing trifling things as before. We're discussing mitosis, right? So we're going to read this. I'm going to read this aloud. And you're going to be able to listen with me. And, well, we're going to see the complexity. But as you can see, for example, with regard to the length of the passage, it doesn't vary. It's a very short passage. I think that 45 seconds is a very comfortable time for you to read it. So I think that no problems will be existing with regard to that, right? Fantastic. Let us continue. So it says, what is mitosis? Let's read. In biology, the process called mitosis is a part of the cell cycle in which chromosomes are replicated and separated into two new nuclei. This is a process that only occurs in certain types of cells, called eukaryotic cells. Most animals undergo this type of mitosis, although the process can vary between one animal and the next. Errors sometimes occur during this process, which is how many forms of cancer come to be. These are typically caused by having too few or too many chromosomes in the duplicated cells. Some organisms also use mitosis as a form of reproduction. There you are. Now, we're going to listen to a lecture on the same topic. But before I do this, let me clarify something. Now, maybe in this class, there is one of you who is a specialist in the area of biology or chemistry. And maybe one of you knows a lot about this topic. You are an expert on the area of, I don't know, DNA or something like that, or anything regarding chemistry or biology. So of course, you know about this. Now, fantastic. If you know something about your topic, incredible. It's going to be easier for you to read it. Now, let me here please warn you of something. Some of you, because of course, all of you are people who are studying in the university, as you have talked to me about, people who are professional, who are experts on areas, who know very much about different topics. Fantastic. That is incredible. Now, you're going to notice that in this particular task, let me come back here to my presentation just for a while. You have here the picture of the journalist one more time. And why did I decide to put the picture of the journalist one more time? Because in this particular task, dear students, your only work is to summarize both materials again, okay? You have to summarize both materials, the reading passage and then the lecture. Remember, I posted the picture of the journalist on my slide because I wanted you to identify yourselves as journalists when responding to this question. Because as journalists do, you have to receive information, take notes on that information, prepare a summary without altering the content, without corrupting the content, and to offer that summary to your audience. You have to do exactly the same here in this third task. That doesn't right. That is to say, you don't have to offer your opinion. You don't have to add anything external to this particular topic. If ETS gives you these two information sources, that is all you have to mention in the response. Please avoid giving your opinion or adding anything external. And as I told you, this is going to be even more tempting to you now. Why? Because as I say, many of you are experts on different areas. So if, well, luckily or ironically, in your exam, you receive a topic about biology and you are a professional in the area of biology, so that you know a lot about your topic, maybe you are tempted to say, hey, but I could complement here the information a little bit. I could say this and this and this of your own. But let me tell you, that is not something very much good or advantageous for you now, dear students, okay? Why? Because as I say, you are not required nor allowed to give your opinion here. So please avoid, even if you know about the topic, adding more information, offering additional data is not a good moment for doing so. You're gonna notice that in a TOEFL exam, there are times for you to give your opinion, to demonstrate how much you know about certain things. You're gonna appreciate that time later. Nonetheless, for now, please remember, be a journalist, all right? And this is even more interesting because, for example, imagine that you are a professional, let's say, in the area of physics, and let's say that your passage talks about Newton's laws or propositions about dynamics. You know about the three Newton's laws, right? That he proposed about dynamics and movement. So imagine that you're a professional in the area of physics, and you receive this topic, and you know, of course, that Newton proposed 3 different laws of dynamics and movement. So if that happens to you, imagine if you know that Newton proposed 3 different laws, but ETS gives you a passage and a lecture that say that Newton merely proposed 2 laws of dynamics and movement. If you know that that is false, should you correct it? Should you comment on that in your response? Well, no, you shouldn't. Because again, you are not here asked nor allowed to give your opinion, nor to add anything external to the response. If you know that something is incorrect, because I say you're a specialist in this area, so sorry, but I mean, this is not the moment for you to do it. And I tell you this for your well-being, right? Because I want you to perform excellently in this task. And even if you know something is wrong, that is to say that ETS gives you raw material that has been ill investigated, that is tremendously bad and erroneously, this is not the moment for criticizing that, right? So make your summary with any information they give you, even if you know is erroneous. Limit yourself to basically make a summary of the information sources they give you, even if you know, as I say, that it is erroneous or that you could complement something to the information, right? No more than that. So now coming back here to my first illustration. Now that we have read this topic about mitosis, let us listen to the lecture, okay, on the same topic. So please, if you have a piece of paper over there, grab it, and also a pencil, because it's important, right, to take your notes here. So please, let us take notes, all right, so that we can later analyze the response together. Let us listen now.
Now listen to a lecture on the same topic.
Okay, so mitosis. Many of you might be wondering how this applies in the real world. Take the example of a cut on your finger. Why doesn't the cut stay open forever? Well, because the cells in your finger undergo mitosis. The body uses this process to repair damage and replace dead cells. It's not always a fast process, The cut on your hand will usually take several days to heal completely. The process of mitosis is at its most rapid when we're in our infancy. It has to be this way. Human beings grow rapidly during this time, so they need a lot of new cells to replace the ones which die and help the baby boy or girl to grow. Other animal species, such as the dog, undergo this process even more rapidly. Ever noticed how a puppy the size of your hand is the size of a small horse 18 months later? Well, the process which enables this rapid transition is mitosis too. Another and very different example of mitosis is that of bacteria. Most bacteria are asexual by nature. That is, they do not require a partner to reproduce. They use mitosis in order to churn out exact copies of themselves. Some bacteria, such as the one called Salmonella, can reproduce once every 20 minutes.
There you go. So if you notice, in this case, it's a lecture on the same topic, and actually the professor discusses, right, some examples or illustrations of mitosis in the real world, right? Now, so if you notice, as I say, she makes reference to the same topic, and this is always going to be the case, all right? Now, after you receive this listening item, what is going to happen is that there is going to be a voice in your headphones, as I told you last time, that will say something like, now that you have listened, please start preparing your response after the beep. And there's going to be a sound like beep, right? And when you listen to that sound, then you know that your 30 seconds for preparing your response have already started. So please, you start preparing your response, etc. And imagine that I have done it, okay? And now we're going to listen to my response for this question. So as I say, imagine that I have utilized my 30 seconds, etc., etc. I prepare my response. I outline every single point or information that I will include, etc. So as I say, let us listen, and please notice that in my response that I'm going to offer in 1 minute, right? Because 1 minute is one more time our maximum or boundary for us to respond, no more than that. I never express what I think about the subject, or I never compliment anything, right? I limit myself to offer a summary that includes the reading passage and the listening passage, okay? Nonetheless, of course, I am following a new structure that I'm going to share with you later on. But for now, please try to identify it by yourself. Notice what is that sentence that I'm using as an introductory one, how I'm continuing my response, how I am performing in the middle of my response, and how I end my response. Try to notice, right? Try to catch all those details, and you're going to come up with the structure by yourself. So let us start and listen to my response, okay? Let's see what I did. Oh, over here. Let's go.
Okay, in the reading passage, we have been immersed into the topic of mitosis, which is a process by which eukaryotic cells are replicated and separated into two nuclei. On the other hand, in the listening passage, we observe some practical applications of this phenomenon in the real world. For example, when we have a cut in our fingers, the way that they heal, or the way that the cut heals, is by mitosis, and the cells are reparated and the damaged ones are simply eliminated, and that way we heal. This process is also very much efficient and rapid in our infancy because we need to grow up, and it is the same case for dogs, because when they are puppies they can grow up super fastly into a completely large animal. Also, it happens in some bacteria which are asexual and do not need partners to reproduce, as for example Salmonella.
Fantastic. There you are. So as you could observe, my response is basically a summary of the reading passage about, well, mitosis, and then I just limited myself to offer a summary of the lecture the professor offered, right? Now, before I show you my template anyways, let me give you one more illustration, okay, for you to grasp the idea a little bit deeper. So here we have another reading passage, and we're going to read it together, okay? I'm going to read it out. So please let us listen, and as I say, you have 4 or 5 seconds to read this, okay? All the passages, doesn't matter. You always have 4 or 5 seconds to read it, okay? Fantastic. So let us start. This is about compassionate consumerism, a different topic. As you can see, I would say that this is a topic that, well, as you can read here, could be taught in a business class, right? So if there is somebody who studies business here, it's going to have some facility, right, to understand this. But let's see. It talks about compassionate consumerism, and it goes like this. Compassionate consumerism is a relatively new trend in the American retail market. In this type of consumerism, when individuals make a purchase, a portion of the money they pay is allocated to a charitable cause. Nowadays, individuals often look for ways to contribute to the betterment of humanity, but they don't always have the financial resources to do so. Compassionate consumerism appears to be a good middle ground. While critics feel that it's only a marketing ploy aimed at appealing to people in their 20s and 30s, others applaud the effort. They argue that it is desirable for companies to sacrifice profits in order to help those in need. There you are, compassionate consumerism. So now that we have read this, we're going to immediately listen to a lecture on the same topic. Okay, so let's see what the professor discusses on the same topic.
Now, as the reading suggests, many companies have embraced the idea of compassionate consumerism over the past few years. Studies show that customers are generally supportive of such efforts, especially very young shoppers. Not only that, but companies make a lot of additional profits from this kind of compassionate marketing. Some companies even thrive off of it. Now, take ABC Shoes, for example. They're kind of like the pioneer of this type of consumerism. You know the shoes, right? Those flat, simple slip-on shoes which are based on a type of traditional Argentinian footwear called an alpargata. Anyway, ABC Shoes achieved a huge market share about 7 years ago with their one-for-one business model. Basically, if you buy a pair of ABC shoes, they donate another pair of shoes to an impoverished individual. While this program has cost ABC Shoes a lot of money to administer, they've also made so much profit that they've expanded to include not only shoes, but also eyewear and coffee. Speaking of coffee, another famous company that has adopted the compassionate consumerism model is Bob's Coffee. Now, the one-for-one model doesn't make much sense for a cup of coffee, but a portion of the cost of certain items is sometimes donated to various nonprofit organizations. Since Bob's deals closely with coffee bean farmers in South America, they have recently launched a campaign where 10% of all purchases are donated to preserving the South American rainforest. And, would you believe it, on the day they announced the campaign, there was a line out the door at Bob's Coffee right here on campus.
Okay. You know what? That I always enjoy the way that she says, there was a line out the door, right? Quite interesting accent. All right. Anyways, as I told you, that is the lecture on the same topic. That is to say, compassionate consumerism. Now that we have listened to this, well, as I say, the immediate response from the computer is going to be, well, a voice in your headphone saying, now that you have read and listened to this information, please start preparing your response after the beep, the sound. Beep. Then you know that your time is already going down, so you have to start with the preparation, right? So imagine that I have already prepared my response, etc., and let us listen to how I responded to this particular question, all right? Let's see.
In the reading passage, we have been immersed into the topic of compassionate consumerism, which is a phenomenon that happens when people buy things knowing that a portion of their payment will be allocated to a charitable fund. Likewise, in the listening passage, we have seen a study that confirms that this practice and method is very much supported by young shoppers, and that it also promotes and helps enterprises to get additional profits. For example, ABC Shoes was a pioneer in this specific practice. They made some sort of shoes called alpargata. They had a one-for-one business model in which they received a purchase and they also gave away another shoes to a poor person. You also have Bob's Coffee, which basically receive a purchase and they donate one portion of that to an ONG. They are launching right now a campaign to help the South American rainforests.
There you are. Fantastic. So that would be my response to the question. Now that we have, well, I think being exposed to these two illustrations, I think it's a good time for us to meditate and discuss the template, right? Because I know that that is going to be super helpful for you. So let me offer you right now, where am I? Yeah. So let me offer you, as I told you, dear students, the template that I was using in all my responses. If you noticed, I always repeated some patterns, and here it is. As you can see, this structure also consists in 4 different steps, right? As you can see, the first step is basically an introduction. And of course, for those purposes, it has an introductory clause or sentence. In this case, I have varied the sentence that we used in the past that, if you remember, was to begin with, right? Etc., etc. Nonetheless, in this case, I have decided to go for a more complex sentence, a little bit, at least from the perspective that I am using right now, some past perfect, etc., present perfect here, some constructions and some complicated words, but nonetheless, as I say, it's anyways very much manageable. Now, actually, maybe some of you are going to find this sentence or introductory phrase to be too basic. So if you consider that to be the case, please feel very much free and encouraged to change the wording of the introductory phrase, because what I am interested about is not the repetition of the words themselves, but the perpetuity of the idea. That is to say, how is this structure adequate and how is this structure used in a response? So that if you remain with this structure, if you remain with the pattern, that is all I need, all right? So as you can see, my introductory phrase, the way I always started my responses was in the reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic of, right? And here, if you notice, for example, this sentence in the reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic of, is basically a very good, let's say, bridge, or it's a very good, I don't know how to describe it, but I would say it's a very good manner to introduce the topic of our response. That is to say, if you notice, the reading passage and the listening passage talked about a single topic, a single subject. And if you notice here, our introductory phrase basically forces us to describe what is that topic, what is the name of that topic, or what is that overall topic that has been discussed both in the reading and the listening passage. So I would say, for example, here, and if you notice, I always say, in the reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic of mitosis, or otherwise, in the reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic of compassionate consumerism, right? So as you can see, it's like, it feels very much natural to mention the title of our reading passage and listening passage, and of course, the overall topic, because what unifies both materials is the topic, right? In this case, compassionate consumerism or mitosis. So in the reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic of mitosis, and then I offer my summary of what the reading passage said, of course, right? So as I said, the summary here is exactly the same that you did before. You summarize what the reading passage says. For example, in the case of mitosis, I would say something like, in the reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic of mitosis. That is a process that consists in the duplication and separation of chromosomes in the cell process, right? Something like that. That is my summary of the reading passage. Now, after you finalize with that, having mentioned the introductory phrase and your summary of the reading passage, what you do is to move on to the second step. As you can see here, we have a connector. It says likewise, which means, of course, asimismo, right? Likewise, in the listening passage, and here comes what the lecture is about. Right here is basically your summary of the lecture. So, for example, coming back to our topic of mitosis, in the reading passage, we've immersed to the topic of mitosis, blah, 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 blah. Likewise, in the listening passage, we have seen a professor that talks about some examples of mitosis in the real world, right? That was exactly what I said. So as you can see here, you offer your summary of the reading passage. Now, let me explain you the function and the purpose of the third and fourth step. As you can see here, the third and the fourth step basically say first lecture's point and second lecture's point. Why is this? The reason is because if you notice, dear students, the two examples that I show you contain a lecture of a professor delivering, of course, a class on the topic you read about. And if you notice, both topics or both lectures in this case had two different ideas mentioned and some illustrations that the professor utilized in order for his students to understand the topic. So for example, in the mitosis lecture, the professor said, I'm going to talk about some examples of this in the real life. First of all, there are some creatures and organisms that use mitosis in order to develop and to heal from certain damage. And she gave some examples, right? She talked about puppies, that is to say dogs, and she also talked about human beings, right? She said, have you ever noticed how puppies that are super tiny rapidly grow up into, I don't know, 3 or, well, I don't know, 2 meters, dogs sometimes? That is because of mitosis. Or have you ever noticed how I said that when you have a cut in your finger or on your fingers, that cut is not there forever, but disappears in a certain amount of time? That is because of mitosis, right? So she makes a point that mitosis collaborates in the process of growing up and also healing from certain damages. And she gives some examples, right? And as I say, in this case, she talked about puppies and human beings. And she later gave a second point. She said that some organisms utilized mitosis as a manner of reproduction. And she talked about a particular example. She talked about salmonella, right? So as you can see, this is a pattern, because normally what happens is that lectures always contain two different points made by the professor, and then the professor basically offers some illustrations and examples for his or her student to understand the topic. So this is very important. Why? Because in your summary of the listening passage or the lecture, everything I mean by this third and fourth step is that you have to include in your summary of the lecture or the listening passage these points that the professor is making. Of course, if the professor mentions more points apart from 2, that is to say, he mentions 3 or 4 points, also mention them. But as I said, it is the pattern, the general pattern, that these lectures merely contain 2 particular points and a lot of illustrations for somehow, well, exemplifying those illustrations. So as I say, include the lecture's points, and also please include, as I mentioned, the illustrations that the professors offer for their students to understand the topic, all right? So as I say, it's basically a summary of the reading passage and a summary of the listening passage without never neglecting to include in our summary of the listening passage the points mentioned by the professor and the illustrations she or she gives as well for that particular point or idea. All right, that is it. Is there any question, dear students, about the template? Anything I could clarify about the structure? Please tell me. I'm going to be very glad to help you with that. Questions? Andrea, Sarah, Angel.
Everything is very clear for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Alexander, Jasmine, Santiago, Mateo, Andrea. Any question about the template? Some clarification that I could make, anything, please tell me. Everything's clear?
Yeah.
Yes,
Fantastic.
it is.
Very good. Thank you very much, dear students. So, given that you have then understood, I think it's a very good moment for us to start with the practice, okay? Because I want you to finalize this class having practiced at least one example, because of course, tomorrow, the entire class is going to be for practice, but nonetheless, given that we have this remaining time, let us practice together. Last thing that I wanted to say, remember, what is the part that you should emphasize in your response? That is to say, in what part of the response or in what particular passage should you spend more time? One more time, you should spend more time in the listening part. That is to say, give yourself more time in order to discuss and talk about the lecture that the professor delivered on the topic you read, instead of spending more time and discussing deeper the reading passage, because as I say, it is the lecture what contains more information for you to discuss, and the reviewer will also appreciate that you spend more time there discussing what is more difficult to comprehend and to grasp, right? So please remember that, very important. Now, let's start with the practice. So I'm gonna show you this. Please look at my screen. You're gonna be able to see the following. This is the first passage we're gonna use. This is a passage about Aboriginal people. It's a passage that could be found in, I don't know, anthropology classes, history classes, things of that sort. So as you're going to be reading this passage from my screen, I'm gonna take your 45 seconds here through my cell phone, all right? And you're going to listen when your 45 seconds are over. So as I say, please, dear students, let us read this. You have 45 seconds, okay, in order to read it. And afterwards, you're going to be listening to a lecture on the same topic, all right? So please, all of you, look at my screen and start please reading this passage now. There you are. Those are your 45 seconds, all right? So now please, dear students, let us listen to a lecture on Aboriginal people. Please take your notes. Remember, tremendously important to have a good recording of what you're going to listen, all right? Let's listen.
According to your textbook, the Aboriginal people are very diverse, and I would agree with that. However, there are certain beliefs that unite the groups, and in fact, allow them to identify themselves and others as members of the diverse Aboriginal societies. For one thing, unlike the anthropologists who believe that tribes arrived in eastern Australia from Tasmania about 40,000 years ago, the Aboriginal people believe that they have always been in Australia and that they have sprung from the land. Evidence for this resides in the oral history that has been recorded in stories and passed down for at least 50 generations. This history is referred to as the dreaming. The stories teach moral and spiritual values and provide each member of the group with an identity that reflects the landscape where the person's mother first becomes aware of the unborn baby, or, to put it in terms of the dreaming, where the spirit enters the mother's body. So, I am saying that the way that the Aboriginal people identify themselves and each other, even across groups, is by their membership in the oral history that they share.
There you are. This, by the way, has anything to do with our exercise, okay? Fantastic. So now that we have listened to this, dear students, you remember we have to start with our 30 seconds of preparation before we respond, okay? So please, now all of you, look at my screen, and here your 45 seconds are going to be counted. So please, all of you, start preparing your responses for this question now. Fantastic. Have all you copied this, right? On your notebooks? Here you have it one more time. Take a picture if you want. Remember, very important to have this structure clear, right? So now we're going to start with this round of responses, okay? So I'm gonna just choose the student that I can see first. Angel, please, you're Angel. You're going to start right with this exercise. So please start. No, it's out. All right, fantastic. So please, dear Angel, start responding to the question now.
In the reading passage, we have been immersed in the topic of inhabitant or Aboriginal people in Australia. The process says that they have been recognized by their physical, they have not recognized by the physical activities, although they live in different regions. Likewise, in the listening passage, the professor says that they identify as other by the characteristics that they have been shared. For example, they share they dreamers pass from generation to generation, and this story are shared due to this fact they are recognized. So the teacher concludes that they identify membership due to the characteristic they share.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, dear Angel. Very good. There you are. Okay, so please, dear Andre, you're going to follow up with this exercise. All right. So please
Okay.
start responding, okay, to the question, please, now.
Okay, in the reading passage, we have been immersed into the topic of Aboriginal people. The reading passage says that no Australian have been identified from any specific characteristics. There is no pattern to identify the Aboriginal people. So they should be identified more from their beliefs than to their physical characteristics. On the other hand, we have that in the listening part, the professor told that there are beliefs that unify each people. They have been, for example, from these beliefs, thought that they all belong from Australia itself. This is called also by a belief called the story. So basically, the way Aboriginal people identify will mostly be by their beliefs regarding where they are from.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, dear Andre. It was very good. All right, let us continue with Sarah. Okay, dear Sarah, you're going to continue. All right, so please start responding to the question now.
In the reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic of Aboriginal people. There's a big diversity identified in Australia, characteristics like culture, language, and local of inhabitants of Australia. Likewise, in the listening passage, they mentioned that there are a big diversity, and the Aboriginal people of Australia identified they have to unify this population. That's all.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, dear Sarah. There you are. And now we're going to listen to Yasmin's response. Please, dear Yasmin, it's your turn for responding this question. All right. So please enable your microphone and start responding to the question now.
Okay. In the reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic of Aboriginal people. It says that these groups is settled in various geographical areas and develop custom and lifestyle. Likewise, in the listen passage, confirms that indeed it is very diverse. Nonetheless, the Aboriginal people says that they have been always in Australia. After this, the teacher mentioned about the dreaming in which they want to be in Australia. This she finishes saying that what they want is the identity of the membership. That's it.
All right, fantastic. Thank you very much, Yasmin, for your response. Santiago, please, dear Santiago, you're going to continue. Start responding, please, dear Santiago, to the question now.
In the reading passage, the topic that we were immersed is about Aboriginal people that lived in Australia. By the other hand, the listening passage that were said by a professor established that Aboriginal people is identified by their culture and the diversity. The first idea that we can take is about that the culture and the characteristic of the Aboriginal people is about the generation that they were passed, and the diversity of these people is established in all the country of Australia.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much, Santiago, for your response. Mateo, please, Mateo, you're going to continue. So please prepare your microphone and start responding to the question now.
Okay, the reading passage says that the Aboriginal people has always been in Australia. And the listening passage is about a professor who says that these people can be identify how where they from, where their culture, and about their generations. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Mateo. All right, and we're going to finalize with Alexander. Please, dear Alexander, let us listen to your response, starting now. Can you hear me, dear Alexander? Shall we start again? Yes? Fantastic. So please, dear Alexander, start responding to the question now.
Okay, so in the regarding passage, we have been immersed in the topic of Aboriginal people in Australia. So tell us that characteristics like culture, language, also physical, also genetics, could be the way to identify the Aboriginal people. Likewise, in the listening, talks about that could be more emphasizing on the characteristics that the people share, like beliefs. So in the first idea could be that that talks about the culture. So the beliefs unite all the people and help them to identify as a group, like people that were living in Tanzania and also identify that also now they live in Australia, and that membership comes from belief that being the history of the culture. That's all.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Alexander. Very good. And we're going to finalize with Andrea, I think, because Andrea had gotten out, but she has come back, right? So please, dear Andrea, set up your microphone and start, please, responding to the question now.
Okay. In the reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic of Aboriginal people, saying that there are several characteristics with which they can be identified. Likewise, the listening passage talks about the same people, saying that they are very diverse and that many anthropologists have many theories, and that they could be identified by their beliefs and the identity of them should be by the community itself. That's all.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Andrea. All right. So as a general feedback, I can say that, well, you are actually, all of your dear students performing very well. I think that as well, for this being your first time is fantastic. And as I said, tomorrow we're going to have an entire class for us to practice. And tomorrow I'm going to give you a lot of personal feedback. But as I say, overall, your performance is wonderful. And well, in this topic, of course, it was a little bit difficult. Nonetheless, yes, you were right. The reading passage basically talked about the differences in the landscape and geography of Australia, and how all those differences and circumstances have provoked that it's very difficult nowadays to identify Aboriginal people because they are very much diverse. Now, the reading passage finalizes its proposition by saying that it is plausible to say that the only manner to correctly identify Aboriginal people in Australia is if the communities themselves accept a particular individual within the community, right? Now, the lecture talked about that, well, the professor in the lecture, right, said that it was true, right? Well, that Australia is tremendously diverse, and that yes, indeed, it is complicated to, to name who belongs to what particular community and who is an actual Aboriginal person. But she says that there is something that actually all cultures or all different communities in Australia share. That is that they have a very, very strong love and a strong faith towards their oral tradition. That is to say that they have allowed these traditions to shape their values, their spirituality, their vision and perspective about the world, etc., etc. And she says that if you identify yourself with that particular oral tradition, then you can be considered part of that particular community. Now, of course, she talks about some details of those traditions. She talks about the dreaming, right? That is a belief that says it's compilation, right? That says and talks about how so that these Australian people believe that they have actually been in Australia, well, forever. Although, of course, nowadays we know that most people emigrated until or towards Australia from different parts of Africa, right? So, well, and in other continents. So nonetheless, as you can see, that is more or less the summary of both materials. But fantastic. I think that also all of you have gotten the main ideas and all of you have managed to express them successfully. So let us stop the class here. But tomorrow we're going to practice a lot. Okay, so please, before you go, let me take your assistance, as I told you, right, for you to get your certificate later. And please, dear students, also collaborate me with the traditional poll that we are always going to fill, and that you know you help me a lot, okay, by filling it. So please look at your screen, help me with that. And if you have any question, please tell me while I take the assistance. It's going to be a pleasure to respond. Where is this? More here. Fantastic. So it's here present, Jasmine Azucena.
Present.
Thank you very much, Jasmine. What about Reyes Andre?
Present.
Thank you very much, Andre. What about Andrea Mercedes?
I'm here.
Thank you very much, Andrea. What about Alexander David?
Present.
Thank you very much, Alexander. What about Angel?
Present.
Thank you very much, dear Angel. What about Mateo Antesana?
Present.
Thank you very much, Mateo. What about Sergio Santiago?
Present.
Thank you very much, Santiago. What about Sara?
Present.
Thank you very much, dear Sara. And finally, we have Kevin Alcides. Okay, it's not our dear Kevin was not here today. Okay, so thank you very much, dear students, okay, for your responses and for your attention. Tomorrow, we're going to discuss a new, well, not new, we're not going to discuss anything as such, but we're going to be practicing, okay? So I see you tomorrow and have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. See
Thank you.
you tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.